So in this journey around the mandala wheel, we've been taking a look at how the lunar cycle actually hits up on all gates, of course, kind of investigating into not only how that moon affects you personally. Go ahead and make sure that you are processing that with awareness. But most particularly, we're going through very specific gate activations that are part of the dying process. And our final dying process gate happens to be the start of the death wheel. Death is just as important as life itself. We rarely have an opportunity to grasp the larger mechanics of life like we do in rave cosmology, where we can peek behind the veil of existence, seeing all these gears and mechanisms at work, as far as something that totally opens us up to a different way of being. Because as we look at the larger process, we get to see that we are immortal, that we've been around forever. Well, relatively to this reality, I would say that, 15 billion years? That's quite a long time, close enough to forever so far. And we who are passenger consciousness, this eternal personality crystal, doesn't know anything really about death because we never really die. One of my favorite recognitions that I've had, we never really die. In fact, one of my favorite movies, Lucy, it's one of my favorite lines from her. She's driving haphazardly down the street, and her passenger is a cop, and he's like, I'd rather get there late than never. And she says, just quite calmly, non-emotionally, we never really die. And that's so true. But in the body's dying process, this monthly lunar sequence where we have a preparation for the journey of death every month, we begin with gate 10, the behavior of the self, and then it moves through into stage 2, gate 3, difficulty at the beginning, this gate of ordering. Then, because we see that the gate of ordering is a part of the Wa mechanic, the large groups of people, and that the next gate actually happens to be that second gate where the magnetic monopole sits, the receptive in stage 3, the gate of the direction of the self, is one of the keys to understanding how it is that we actually leave this form, or what causes part of the deterioration of the form in that final stage. We who are studying human design deeply know that the gate 2 is part of the small group channels, and that gate 14, which is part of our process today, is going to be one of the gates that we work with. And it has a preponderance of importance, I would say, in the human design system, this gate 14. So if you have not yet watched my training on tantric channels, please remind me so that I can add that to your course area as a bonus. It's going to help you understand not only the 14 and 2, but also the 29 as part of our death journey, to get a big picture view. And so that too, that magnetic monopole, we know that it holds us together in the illusion of separation, that it turns in order to face death once a month. Every single one of us on this planet, that magnetic monopole turns in preparation for death. This monopole that holds the personality to the form, that gives us our illusion of separation from the totality of existence. And that when it's time for the death to happen, that the design, this design, crystal, reunites with that magnetic monopole, and together they leave the body, while our personality just floats there. We never really get into the body, full embodiment. We as a passenger consciousness, we are the witness, and this body is the life experience. So our magnetic monopole, gate 2, the monopole is sitting on the gateway to death. And further on in our journey, we looked at the gate 29, part of the the abstract circuitry, where we see our commitment to life, where we have the source of our life process here in the sacral, our ability to say yes to life and yes to death. The power to commit oneself to an experience is this 29, the abysmal, the deep within the deep, deeper than even the well, part of the design of succeeding where others fail. Isn't it true that, you, me, we won the lottery as far as embodiment, this game, because there were lots of other sperm there in our mother's body, and we happened to be the lotto ticket winner for this life. Unless we were a part of a twin or triplet or quadruplet or quintuplet or whatever the case may be, those rarities. So now that was our review. Welcome to everybody who's joining. Let's get to that 14th gate in our final stage of dying. Tantra brings such a critical aspect of the empowerment of the identity. And you can see here in our death process, the 5 stages of dying, if we add them all up into the body graph, we can see that one of the Tantra channels is lit up there. So the process of our stage 1, 10, stage 2, 3, stage 3, 2, stage 4, 29, and stage 5, 14. It's interesting. He says everything about this process here can be irreversible, as in there's a possibility of the process of our dying cycle every month coming back from that, as in the 29 doesn't necessarily have to lead to death, that we can come back from that brink. However, the moment that we get to the 14, this is really when we have the disengagement and the irreversible deterioration. There we go, deterioration, when it comes to our form principle, the dying, the final stage of our dying process. So 14 carries a language of irreversible. So when we go through the sequence every month, when that 14th gate clicks in, well, that's it. As far as the body graph's ways of getting us to this place of awareness about what's most important for us to remember. So he's fascinated by all these components, as we can well tell, because of look at all the detail he expended upon in all of those, 25 years of teaching, looking at things from every angle. When you start to repeat classes, as in you're going into a lot of different classes at different levels and layers, you see how he is hitting it at different angles, just like, with the Tantra being one of the things that he talks about, in addition to family practice, in addition to OC16 or sociology or BG5. There are so many different layers and layers and layers and layers of keynotes. But when we get to this 14, this is the place, as far as hierarchically, no end to hierarchies within the body graph, but this is the place where there is a very specific key, if you will. We're going to talk about the 14 as the gas pedal. The gas pedal and the 2 being the driver. So what if there's no more gas in the tank? What if we're done? Well, then we're done and it's over. It ain't over till it's over, but yeah, when we get to the 14, it's over. So then the question occurs, why doesn't death happen for everybody at the same time in the cycle? When we close on that 14, when we get this perspective of the deeper significance of the 14, the gate of power skills, where we have what we're dealing with, why it's irreversible. Why isn't it like finite? Okay, just drop dead at gate 14. That would be quite interesting, wouldn't it? If that were true, we could totally prepare for our death. We could have that death party, like I was mentioning. I'm just going to drop dead when the moon hits 14. But that doesn't actually happen. What happens is that we're going to find out all the answers to the questions that you're pondering and processing. It's the 14, though, that has the disengagement and irreversible deterioration. in this final stage. So death being a place, if we think about what the 14 does, it empowers direction, yes, as far as our identity and specifically our place. This is one of the direction gates, the gate 2. So all of the keys that we're going to be looking at in relationship to this 14 and how important it is, of all of them, it is the power or empowerment of moving in a direction, the place. And we are all passenger consciousness riding around in vehicles that are spiraling through space and time. As we move through space, death is a place, a direction that we can move to or go through. So when we look at the gate 14 as the power that empowers the cross of the Sphinx, the cross of direction, these are the Sphinx gates, Neptune's trident or Shiva's trident, if you wish. And this 14, as far as the moon, initiating that death dance, that final death cross. Here we look at the power to the 2, and then splitting off into 3 different directions. Here and now, that's where 70% of the energy that's generated down here at the bottom in this pentagraph funnels through the middle, with 15 going towards future and 15 going towards past. And we're looking at directional empowerment when we're talking about that 14 connected up with the 2. And so when we see all of the gates lit up inside of the identity, the G, the higher self, we can see the beautiful magnificence of the equality of the mandala wheel, the 8 great houses of the I Ching being lit up. Love and direction, love and direction, love and direction, love and direction, this alternating patterning, setting the foundation for the following hexagrams. So the direction that we see through the Sphinx, Shiva's trident, and then the 4 gates of the vessel of love, oracally, how we maintain the illusion of separation. All of that is thanks to the magnetic monopole holding me to me and you to you, and us to our path and our trajectory, our direction in space. So we see these 2 great arms of these crosses, each either love, transcendent, and a little bit of personal love too, has dual duty, the behavior of the self, transcendent love of the world as it is, or the love of self. Or not, of course, there's always the or not. We have a binary in this polarity. So the Sphinx is going to be fueled by the gate 14, this trident of direction, this staff you can see. To remember that it's a Sphinx, I like to think of it as looking down upon the Great Sphinx in the Giza Plateau in Egypt, where this is the tail, the 2, the head being the 1, and the 2 arms on either side, the 2 paws, if you will. So the 14 and 2 empowers the fork or the prong, the 3 prongs going out into the direction looking to the future, direction looking to the past. And in truth, it is that everything is now, all is here now, which affects the past and informs the future. The eternal nature of now affecting the past, which informs the future. So all we really have is this moment here and now that we are attuned to. The now informing the past, which affects the future. Remember that. It's a very critical aspect of the life process. The empowerment of the material form happens because of our gate 14. This is the great engine that jump-starts any business, any family, any team dynamic, anything, everything. 14, if you start to study OC16 or rave sociology, large group mechanics, you learn that 14 has no quote-unquote power base, as in specific channels that funnel into it, because everything funnels through it. this individual circuitry, the great gate of empowerment. It's deep capacity when asked to empower. This theme of individual capacity in this circuitry, part of the knowing circuitry, the empowerment of individuality and our material form, the material self. Think about what gate 2 is. Remember, it's all yin lines, right? It is the form, all yin. Moving up through the higher self into all yang lines, as far as the hexagram lines, the construct is concerned. So as it is about the empowerment of the direct, mutative, individual, empowering direction, the entire Sphinx being powered by that 14. It's one of the reasons why those of us with 14s in our incarnation crosses often hook up with gate 2s in their incarnation crosses. It's a very important partnership or relational dynamic, this possession in great measure that the 14 brings. An enormous resource of power in response that fuels the driving of the direction of the Sphinx into this world as part of the penta. So now we see the 14, this channel of the beat, design of being a keeper of the keys to the kingdom. What kingdom is that? The lottery game of being embodied in this life in flow, don't you know? Because it fuels our higher self, our identity. When we look at penta, the group of 3 to 5 people, the base group of 5, we see that it is a transpersonal auric frequency. That transpersonal aura is the way that our consciousness in different forms are actually organized in order that we are controlled, homogenized, dumbed down, you could say, made to feel good, all for one and one for all, to be on the same team. So when it comes to the penta in the group dynamic, small group dynamic, it drives us materially. It has to. This is how we are competitive on the material plane. It is the bedrock upon which any community or species ultimately is built and maintained, because this is how we find our material direction. And that one key gate, the linchpin, you could say, between this 2 and 14, they need each other, or they are critical. It is the 14th gate, and that is the end, the final say. With that 14th gate being the heart and soul of the material force of life driving Wa mechanics, groups of 10 to 16 people or more, till we get to do a gene pool. This is literally the way we can direct and guide the largest possible auric configuration that is being driven at a deeply material level and utilizing the entirety of the body graph in its mechanics. So we have the tantric channels when we're dealing with the 14th gate. Again, the empowerment of one's identity, one's form. So it's a deeply mystical gate. You know how in line qualities we see that the 6 lines have a kind of mystical bent? It's a very mystical quality that we have here as our final stage in our evolutionary journey of dying. Dying is just an evolutionary doorway. So we're looking at the sacral center connected up to the higher self, the G. These deeply misunderstood tantric channels. People think the Kama Sutra or, some kind of sexual positions, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's the power to empower individuality, the life force, the closest that we get to the identity in the basis of life is right here. Remember, it's empowering all of this, empowering all of this, the direction and love. The energy to maintain our material form is found here in the 14. So when we talk about anything with regards to this 14th gate, it's a deeply profound key. It's a key to the material life, to be empowered, not only as yourself, whether you have a 14 or not. Remember, everyone has everything in the body graph. You all have 14s. You just might have a couple of planets there, like Lavina, or not. 1 or 2 or 3. Oof, interesting, huh? To have very specific keys. This is the energy to maintain your material form so that there is a specific allotted time that you have your power in this form on this planet. And we recall that Ra brought it up, that the serotonin counter, as in the amount of serotonin one makes in one's life and one utilizes, is the death limitation of the form serotonin. So don't mess with your serotonin. When it comes to this 14th gate, in this final stage of disengagement and irreversible deterioration, as an overall theme, what happens is the moon, as it goes through this entirety of stage 1 through 5 into the 14, what happens is that every time moon goes through this cycle, monthly cycle, is that the 14th gate maintains a consistency of our directional energy, and it appears that we'll never die. There's no end in sight. Yeah, everybody just lives as if they're never going to die. And as the Dalai Lama would say, and dies having never really lived. If one thinks that money is the whole aim and goal of the life, money isn't everything. Gate 14, line 1. But when we get to this 14th gate, and it's actually time to fix into the death cycle, this clicking off, you could say, that moment where you get to the fixing, this is the sense of you're only going to have just enough fuel to go only so far and no further. So, here and no further, and this is it. The engine petering out because the gas has been drained, completely stopped. The 14th gate, the gas pedal, it stops fueling the body. See, the body, the material self, the yin, 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 yin. We're looking at the material self. It's not about the psychological nature of oneself. Okay, the body is the life, the vehicle. Remember that the magnetic monopole is holding us to that design crystal form, this vehicular encounter with this embodiment. So this instrument of life, when it stops getting fueled properly, according to the 14, the unlimited supply of energy, refreshed, recharged, renewed, regenerated, no more. So this physical form now has disengagement or irreversible deterioration, and it's all about that final stage of the 14th gate, this possession in great measure, gate of power skills, the body, the form. So the thing that Ra would often quote is that there's so much vanity, thinking that this is my body. You know, it appears to be yours, but it's a borrowed, rented vehicle. This total engagement with keeping your wagon. Remember, the 14 is this ancient archetypal image of a loaded down wagon, possession in great measure. So keep the wagon filled up and keep it moving and fuel this wagon. But as a 14 key in this life process, the extraordinary gift of empowering identity and direction and love, the essential energy that maintains our physical material form in a set amount of space and time, this movement through time. When we get to the 6th line, again a spiritual line, it talks about humility. The most fitting line that we could come up with. The humility is about the recognition that everything at about being here now or on this material plane is not your will. It's not by your will. Remember, the personality is not willful. Your mind may make up stories, reasons, why this or that. It doesn't matter why it happened. Things happen. People die, people leave, and the mind in its vehicular attachment identifies with the body as its ownership, as in you are your body. You are not. You are so much more. Your mind processes your life being determined by the vehicle, as in the cellular structure matrix that creates all of the frequency fields that generate this life. Remember, the body is built by the auric frequency, not the other way around. So the moment that the auric frequency is over, there is deterioration. Our personality consciousness, witness consciousness, is completely dependent upon the body. So when there is disengagement, there is an irreversible deterioration. So there's two themes that we have to deal with here. Disengagement first, then we have the irreversible deterioration. We're actually talking about physical deterioration of the vehicle, not the mental stuff that we talked about earlier. This is physical, where we see people seem to be, oh, well, everything's fine. And then all of a sudden, there comes this just disappearing or falling away of them because their body has entered into the deterioration process or disengagement. If you grew up driving a stick, I did, when it comes to disengaging the gears, you can put it into neutral and then you're just coasting. Oh, me who loves to leverage energy and maximize energy and resources, I would often do that. I grew up on Hawaii at the Big Island on the Kona side, where there are some very steep hills and mountains to climb. Generally speaking, I would live up at the mountainside rather than down by the beach side. And I just loved coasting, thinking about how much gas I was saving by just coasting, taking it out of gear. So it's very much the same way that this happens when there is disengagement. No more gears connecting, no more gears, because there is the disengagement. And instead of driving the vehicle with its life force, the 14, it is a mutation that happens. Death is a mutation. Isn't that nice? A transformation. And it takes place at a certain time. The time is set by the serotonin depletion to a certain degree according to Ra. So the signal that's released, the information, just waiting for the right moment, getting into the right place, waiting for the time, and then we have disengagement. So the 14th gate, whether or not you have a planet there, it will drive you along and fuel you, because the 14, that's what it's supposed to do. And then it looks like you're going to live forever. Spike! We have a mutation. And it comes just as fast after that we disengage and deteriorate. After that disengagement, we deteriorate. So the disengagement of the gearing, instead of driving it, now we have deterioration. And that 14 is going to impact the driver. Who's the driver? The magnetic monopole. Not us, not the personality crystal floating out here in space. It's not our job to control the vehicle. So the 14 takes the power away from the driver. No more gas. But that impacts the vehicle itself, because then we have this gearing force, the movement, instead of going up into the trident, pushing forward, or going into the present, or reflecting upon the past, we're just coasting. It doesn't seem to be running over or under its own power anymore. We're just coasting. And the fuel, having petered out, creates that disengagement. And when that 14 disengages, it sets into motion this death dance. Remember the death dance, the death wheel? It sets into motion the disengagement process of the design crystal from the ajna itself. And when that moon leaves the 14-6, at the moment the cycle has set in, the moment the design crystal, like a little chick trying to break out of an egg, you ever seen that? Naraya, I know you've seen that in person. Naraya raises chickens. So the design crystal disconnecting itself, disengaging from that ajna center, breaking out, breaking through, and the monopole is going to fix itself on a direction. That description of the second gate, while this monopole, instead of turning to being pointed upwards at the ajna, remember it turns down towards the sacral through to the 14 and out through the 60. That's the death process. So this is the moment of death. Okay? The moment of death is when the design crystal and the magnetic monopole reunite. They are still in the body, but that is the death. That movement that takes place of the disengagement. Okay, disengagement happens at 14.6. 14.6, disengagement, and then boom. We have the shutting down of the splenic system, because that's our immune system. The design crystal disengaging from its position in the ajna, beginning its descent or its journey to re-meet the magnetic monopole, that unconditional love. When they separated, they built the body. And here, when they reunite, when they're one, that's the death. That's the moment of death. And then we have the leaving through gate 60 and out through the invisible doorway at the bottom of the root. So that 14th gate, the empowerment of the material self, and that's actually whereupon the unit of the body, its design crystal, form crystal, and its driver, the monopole, actually gets through this 14 into and through the 3 and into the 60 and out through the invisible doorway. So it's not about your personality crystal that's hovering around up here when it comes to the material plane business. The 14 is about empowering the material plane, or your body, your form, which is how we interface with the material plane. Material self is here, a center of being, this vortex spiraling of energy. So what happens then at that moment of irreversible deterioration, the moment of death, what happens is that the personality can struggle, as in the panic sets in, because there's a sudden visceral recognition that death is on the way. The personality has to deal with all of that if it's awake and cognizant. So everything about death, this design crystal that's coming down into the G, okay, it comes down from the ajna into the G, linking, there's the link, there's the hookup, where we have the monopole and the design crystal being one, going down, and this is where death happens. The moment of death, the leaving of the body, so that the design crystal and the monopole become one and go back into the center of the earth to be recycled, so to speak, because the body only lives once, this one precious life that it has. And you as a personality were selected by the body, the magnetic monopole holding you accordingly to your frequency, to the vehicular construct of the design crystal. So it is not your body. You got to use it, borrow it. It chose you. And it is not a choice to be embodied. Because we're dealing with an energy that fuels the material self, possession in great measure. He keeps talking about material self for multiple reasons, because the 14 is, again, the engine. It is the fuel. It is the thing that allows this rocket ship to take off into space. What is space? Love is space. Love is a place. Love is a direction, the direction of the higher self. So, the deterioration that's taking place is at the deepest disintegration of the form, regardless of whether you look wherever you look in that body. Any cell, any organ, any endocrine gland, whatever it is that you're looking at, there's no longer the possession in great measure. There's no longer this abundance of power being offered because the 14 shut down. The wagon is empty. It's not going to be replenished. The life drifting away. Irreversible deterioration. That is a very powerful theme, where the deterioration shuts off any attempt of the immune system to maintain, fight to struggle for a life that's worth living. No more. It's gone. So it is about the immune system surrendering. Surrender. Surrender your ego. No more of this show. And what Ra says about us as rave cosmology practitioners is that where we can be of value, well, you don't even have to practice this, it's just knowing this information. Where we can be of value is where we can see what the moon is doing. Did it go through the 14? Is it in the 14-6? This is someone that you will want to be with over the next lunar cycle, because at any moment in this next month, they're going to leave the plane. And it's just about waiting to align with the right time that is theirs to grasp when it comes to the personality's specific Bardo experience. Have you ever listened to Ra's 64 steps, the evolutionary steps, or read his 64 gates in the Line Companion? How it's like this magnificent clock, this mandala wheel, has keys to everything, everything under the sun. You know, there's so many different ways we could move. The Book of Changes, yes, 64, and all of those 6 lines. So the moment of death shows us our Bardo stage upon which the personality gets to comprehend its life meaning, life process. After the moon passes through that 14-6, then we have the death wheel. When we enter into the death wheel, we're going to move step by step, these evolutionary steps in this spiraling through space and time, to the perfect exit, whatever that happens to be, that specific death, which is the doorway, the perfect, specific Bardo experience for the personality to be aligned to the crystal bundle that you yourself are associated with. So, what bundle are you associated with? Which bundle is it yours to go back to? In the band 2, when it comes to the Rave Cosmology program, when it comes to our personality crystal bundles and configurations, how our personality aligns to the wheel and to specific gates, we know incarnatively that we have a personality crystal that comes from a specific bundle. And it's one of the most fascinating things about being able to track the moment of death, the movement through the death wheel. It can allow you to see what the source personality bundle is. So we're aligning to return to our source, specifically to that correct Bardo, that correct frequency. So when the moon transits out of the 6th line of the 14th gate, at any moment in that cycle, from that point onward, you can go, as in the body and the design crystal and the magnetic monopole, most specifically, the body can go. And then you, as a personality, get your Bardo stage. It can also last almost the full cycle of the moon, the full 28, 29 days. This lingering as part of the energetic process, the slowly weakening. Maybe it's a drawing out process that isn't necessarily a benefit in having the time. This dilemma is that every one of us has a very specific trajectory, a movement through space and time. That is the specific time, place, space, reality where every single one of us are intended to go out our own door or close out our own death process. And that is where we're intended to be able to return back to our source. So it's not a choice as far as the death process. With the disengagement and that irreversible deterioration, with no longer the empowerment of the material self, again, two things to keep in mind. No longer the physical functioning happening of that form, because all aspects of the form begin to deteriorate. No matter what the dilemma was, maybe it was a sickness, an illness, a dis-ease, a crisis that created the emergence of the potential for the dying cycle to be initiated. The weakest auras are going to be the ones who deteriorate the fastest. So in other words, when the deterioration sets in, it's irreversible. And that immune system goes, I give up, no more fighting me. So the weakest auras go more quickly. And when that immune system shuts down, everything shuts down. So that is what it means to be sacral. Remember, here in the 14th gate, this movement in Wa mechanics, this engine that is about any large grouping, we see that there is a movement over preservation, a design of custodianship, the logic of nourishing the body intelligence, or the value system of the defense system. We can see that the 14th gate is responsible for the entirety of the material plane, as in the material domain of the form, because it drives the sexual functions, it drives the whole business process, everything. It's at the center of this spoke, wheel, hub of energetic domain, generative energy. So when it deteriorates, its deterioration becoming irreversible, the moment that happens, everything starts to shut down, close down, going out of business. The body just starts breaking down. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that funny. I saw a sign going out of business, so it flipped and I said it. It just starts breaking down, and the spleen literally gives up. It won't hold on anymore. Remember that the theme here is about holding on. No more holding on. No more holding on to things that are good or aren't good for you. It's just one of the things to understand about our splenic system. It holds on to life. It clings to life tenaciously. But it must be powered. It is not a motor. It must be empowered. So the purest empowerment of the splenic center is actually coming from the 14th gate. The same is true of our emotional, sacral, reproductive potential, powered by this 14th gate and this movement of energy throughout the body graph. And so wealth and power at its most exalted is a beautiful line. I have this in my Mars unconscious, the thing that is most mutative on the body side. We know Mars brings mutation. It controls temperature, it controls heat on the body. And so this gate 14, line 6 is one of the themes. If you don't worship the body as in the temple, the house of the spirit. You miss out on this exaltation by the privilege of having the life process, as in the enlightened recognition that material success is God's will. Because my sun is here in conjunction with the Mars, this is my activation, as in this is my experience. Material success is God's will. So, because this is part of the privilege to have this life, once the life is over, that incredible richness and depth of power, once it's removed, all one can do is embrace death with humility. I've lived a beautiful life. You know, in terms of deconstructing the life, when it comes to the philosophy that Ra teaches to us, there is no choice. It is about choicelessness, helplessness, being our grace. It's not a death sentence. It's a freeing capability to have lived the life, the profound place and peace that you get in the end, the wealth and power of life at its most exalted, is what it means to be embodied in this form with gas in the tank. Because the richness of what life is, despite the difficulty of committing to life's process and journey, the real exaltation is that this has nothing to do with us personally. Remember, sixth line, it's detached, it's unattached, it's moving beyond, down the line of circuitry. And what is the circuitry? Full empowerment of knowing. It's not personal. The duality works, you know, this and that. We have mind, we have body, we have this body in its temple capability, where we have the beauty, the wonderment, the joy, the awe, and it isn't ours. We are watching a movie. So hard to poke your head through the sky and realize the disingenuity of the ego I, as in, it lies. It's so hard. It's not something that I always remember. I could find myself caught up in ego I. And even the enlightened recognition that material success is God's will. It's in God's hands. There's very few mentions of the word enlightenment in the 384 lines of the Rei Ching. But material success is God's will. The themes of choicelessness. It's a deep awareness that life is given and life is taken, and it is not up to us personality-wise. It is just that we are eternal passengers witnessing this life. It's not about us individually, our empowerment or our success. It is the body's life. So we are a binary consciousness, and this material bounty or success, the beauty, the incredible wonderment, the form, has nothing to do with the personality. As in, the personality gets to witness, hey, the body coming to an end. You get to stay. You are abandoned, personality, to live your experience of Bardo. Bardo, the incarnative wonderment. Spirituality is the key to acceptance and the source of power. This is the acceptance of death, as in humility. I've lived a great life. That we are helpless in these forms, letting go. It's what we're here to do as a personality, to surrender. The part of our awareness of the program, you know, in the beginning, we try to get to this point of recognition of our connection to the form. Because in the beginning, when we're first embodied, you know, when we're first born, we don't have the ego I yet. We have to get conditioned into that identification. And then where we let go of the personalization or the personification of the I, thinking that this is all there is, we can let go of trying to be in control. The personality can sometimes find the design quite horrendous. We are all beasts, as in we're all animals still. And haven't you ever looked at your body and gone, what the hell? Why did I do that? Like, what is this behavior or whatever it is that you might have experienced as you witness, as you watch these beasts of burden? If we look at the earth in detriment, sun and earth, and this exalted line of humility, the earth is actually not really a detriment. One of those places where it says, the earth represents the existentialist recognition that material success was unavoidable and the humility engendered by such serendipity. It's one of the things, not just a spiritual language, as in, this actually happened because you lived, didn't you? You know? You lived. You were materially successful because you were alive. You existed. Isn't that extraordinary? The wealth that came with life, and even more so with death. Because what it is to turn off the life program, to set the direction to death, that moon in gate 14, line 6, we leave behind all of our wealth and our power. You can't take it with you. Not the body, nor the things one has accumulated in this life. That's what the form is about. You leave it behind. You leave it all behind. So when we're dealing with the 14th gate, it's an extraordinary power, isn't it? Can you tell I love it? Oh, it's my son. Of course you love it, Lavina. So the moment that you get to this point where the death becomes irreversible because of the disengagement and the deterioration of the form, where the spleen simply shuts down, everything shutting down, and we come to an end. The body actually produces the chemistry that prepares one for death. So it's going to begin to anesthetize. Am I saying that right? Anesthetize the personality. So we have the irreversible deterioration. So that means our neuronal network, our neural information, the things that register pain, all the things that slow down and then deteriorate and just simply stop functioning. There's information that the brain isn't necessarily receiving anymore. And these things are happening to the personality so that the personality is helped to its process of disengagement, the bliss chemicals of death. Remember, you are the eternal passenger. Death doesn't belong to you as a personality. Ra asks us, why do you think the personality is so uncomfortable in form? The personality is immortal. It's been around forever, our forever, 15 billion years. The Big Bang, whatever you want to call it. Personality crystal doesn't know anything about death. It doesn't die. He goes on to say that to eliminate a personality crystal is a major event. You would need a cosmic interaction for that kind of event to disintegrate personality crystals. They've survived for 15 billion years, not in these forms, of course. The form, this body, this vehicle, it's finite, it's terminal, it will get recycled and we get a new body. That's how evolution works. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. So he says they're terminal. This is what they're all about. Nothing more, nothing less. We're here to do, what we're here to do is touch the soul, the personality. Okay? And you can. So this is one of those places, you know, people often say, well, which one is the soul? And Ra would tell the story about how, I think it was the ancient, maybe, not Aryans, what are the ancient Lebanese? They actually had 2 graves for their bodies. And he would tell that story, and you're not really quite sure, is the personality the soul? And here he says, what we're here to do is touch the soul, the personality, and you can. So therein lies the answer. Personality is the soul. There is no great reward for the personality, except Bardo, because this is the body's life. The best that we can do as a personality is disengage from our so-called not self, as in the mental authority in this life. Disengage from the helplessness, choicelessness, as far as the fruitless struggle with choicelessness, rather than seeing it as our grace, as surrendering. For me, my personality, witness consciousness, is here to accept whether those feelings are quote unquote pleasurable or not, good, bad, right, wrong, who knows, accept what is. It is the material plane, the way of the world to accept. There are certain things that are. And it is not a choice to follow your strategy and authority. It isn't. Unfortunately, says the mind. Because this is our life, our witness, our soul's incarnative journey in this life, in this body, with this body, walking alongside this body. God carrying you. Remember, God too lives inside of you. When we talk about the personality, our personalities and in our bodies reaching out to another personality in their body, when there's someone in this phase of dying, no matter how distant they appear to be in the movement from the gate 14, remember, they can be deteriorating. So no matter how unresponsive they may appear to be, don't stop telling them, because the personality is still there listening, according to Ra. There's this powerful deterioration process that's taking place, but it doesn't mean that information is not getting in. In a sense, it is. Remember, we are energetic creatures. So our frequency, our chemistry, we commune with each other. You don't have to, sometimes you don't have to talk, you can just touch, and that is communication enough. So the opportunity that we have, whether we be professionals in this or just a friend or family member, holding space for that being to disengage and to go, for the personality to get reoriented towards its possibility of freedom and towards liberation. Remember, the last stage speaks of enlightenment and humbleness or humility. So we go into the wheel of incarnation, of existence, and we go as far along as there is a fuel, gate 14, in that coasting vehicle, because the vehicle after 14 is now coasting. We get exactly to the slot, the time slot, like that ball falling into exactly the right place on a roulette wheel. A magical space of our exit to be able to find our Bardo stage. So, trusting in your aura, surrendering to the body, loving yourself unconditionally and completely. It is the practice of what it means to be truly incarnate into this vehicular capability, passenger consciousness, witnessing the life as you move, spiraling through space and time in the existence of what it means to be alive and what it means to embody fully, completely, the final transformation, the final mutation, death.